The shuttle dropped through the clouds of Nexus Prime, and Mira Chen pressed her face against the window like a child. Below her, the Galactic Unity Academy spread across the purple hills, like a city made of crystal and light. Towers reached toward the sky. Gardens glowed with plants from 100 different worlds. Flying vehicles moved between buildings like schools of fish. Mira was 17 years old. She was small, even by human standards, with black hair cut short and dark eyes that missed nothing. She wore the gray uniform of a new student, and she carried everything she owned in a single bag. She was one of only 3 humans ever admitted to the academy. "First time off Earth?" asked the Nathari student sitting next to her. He was covered in soft gray fur with large eyes that reflected the light. His name was Sil, and he had been kind to her during the long journey. "First time off my continent," Mira admitted. "I had never even been on an airplane before last month." Sil made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You will do fine. The Academy accepts only the best. They would not have chosen you if you did not belong here." Mira wanted to believe him, but she had read the news feeds. She knew what the galaxy thought of humans. Her species had only made contact with the wider universe 12 years ago. They were called primitive, aggressive, dangerous in the way that wild animals were dangerous. The term provisional species meant that humanity was being watched, tested, judged. One wrong move, and Earth could be isolated forever. The shuttle landed, and Mira stepped out into her new life. The Academy was even more impressive from the ground. Students of dozens of species walked the paths between buildings. Mira saw creatures with scales, with feathers, with skin that changed color as they moved. She saw beings that floated instead of walked, and others that seemed to be made of living stone. And she saw the Velkorath. They were impossible to miss. The Velkorath stood over 2 meters tall, with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Their faces were flat and expressionless, with clusters of small eyes and clicking mandibles where a mouth should be. They moved in groups, and other students stepped out of their way. Mira had studied them. The Velkorath were one of the founding species of the Galactic Unity. They held more seats in the Senate than any other race. They believed they were born to rule, and for thousands of years, no one had seriously challenged that belief. One of them noticed Mira staring. The Velkorath stopped walking and turned to face her fully. Mira felt her heart freeze in her chest. "Human," the Velkorath said. The word sounded like an insult. "I had heard they were admitting animals this year. I did not believe it." Mira said nothing. She kept her face blank and her body still. "Do not react," she told herself. "Do not give them anything." The Velkorath made a clicking sound that might have been laughter. Then she walked away, her group following behind her. Sil appeared at Mira's side. "That was Kethra Voss," he said quietly. "Her father is Senator Voss, one of the most powerful beings in the Unity." He paused. "Stay away from her, Mira. She is not someone you want as an enemy." But Mira already knew it was too late for that. She had seen the look in Kethra's eyes. The Velkorath had already decided to hate her. The first weeks at the Academy were hard. Mira worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. The classes covered subjects she had never imagined: quantum mechanics, xenobiology, the history of a galaxy that had been civilized for millions of years while humans were still living in caves. She was behind in almost everything, but she did not give up. She studied while other students slept. She asked questions until her teachers grew tired of her. Slowly, her grades began to rise. The other students mostly ignored her. To them, she was a curiosity, nothing more. A few were friendly, like Sil. Most simply looked through her as if she did not exist. But Kethra watched her, always watching. The bullying started small. Mira would arrive at her desk to find her materials missing. She would walk through a corridor and feel a sharp shove from behind. But when she turned, no one was there. She would hear whispers that stopped the moment she came close. She reported nothing. What could she say? The daughter of a senator was playing childish games with her. No one would care. No one would help. One evening, Mira sat alone in the dining hall, eating the bland food that was the only thing her human stomach could digest. Kethra walked past her table and stopped. "You know you do not belong here," Kethra said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "Your species is barely out of the mud. You have no history, no culture, no future among the stars. Mira looked up at her. My species walked on our moon before we knew the galaxy existed, she said quietly. We did it with metal tubes and controlled explosions. We did it because we wanted to see what was there. Kethra's mandibles clicked rapidly. And that is supposed to impress me? No, Mira said. I just thought you should know who you are dealing with. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Kethra's eyes. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Syl found Mira later that night. He looked worried. I heard what you said to her. That was very brave. It was very stupid, Mira corrected him. Perhaps both. Syl sat down beside her. You should be careful, Mira. The Vel'Korath do not forget insults, and Kethra has power you do not understand. Mira stared out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, impossibly far away, was Earth, her mother, her little brother, everyone she had left behind to come to this place. I know, she said, but I am not going to spend 3 years with my head down and my mouth shut. If I do that, I might as well go home now. She did not know it then, but Kethra was already planning her next move. The games were about to end. What came next would be much worse. And watching from the shadows, seeing everything and doing nothing was Instructor Vornish. He had taught at the academy for 40 years. He had seen students come and go, rise and fall, succeed and fail. He saw the human girl. He saw what Kethra was doing to her, and he decided it was not his problem. Students settled their own hierarchies. That was the way of things. The human would learn to survive, or she would wash out. Either way, it was not his concern. He was wrong, but he would not understand how wrong until it was far too late. Kethra Voss spent 3 days in the academy library, studying humans. She read everything she could find, their biology, their history, their weaknesses. And humans had so many weaknesses. They were soft, with no shells or scales to protect them. They were slow compared to most species. They could not see in the dark. They could not hear sounds beyond a narrow range. They needed constant food and water and sleep. Their bodies broke easily and healed slowly. But one weakness interested Kethra more than any other. Human ears were sensitive to certain frequencies of sound, sounds that most species could not hear at all. These frequencies cause pain in humans, disorientation, nausea. At high levels, they could cause bleeding and permanent damage. Kethra smiled, though on her face it looked more like a wound opening. She knew exactly what she was going to do. The device was small, no bigger than a button. It fit perfectly under the collar of her uniform, invisible to anyone who was not looking for it. It produced a sound that only humans could hear, a sound that felt like needles being pushed slowly into the brain. Mira noticed the change immediately. She was walking to her morning class when the pain started. It came from nowhere, a sharp whine inside her skull that made her stumble. She grabbed the wall to steady herself. The sound seemed to pulse, growing stronger and then fading, like waves crashing against rocks. She looked around. No one else seemed to notice anything. Students walked past her without a second glance. The sound existed only for her. Then she saw Kethra standing at the end of the corridor, watching her. The Vel'Korath's mandibles clicked once, and then she turned and walked away. The sound stopped. Mira stood there for a long moment, her hands shaking. She understood what had just happened. She understood what was coming, but she said nothing. The attacks continued over the following weeks. Sometimes the sound would hit her in the middle of class, making it impossible to concentrate. Sometimes it would wake her in the middle of the night, destroying any chance of sleep. Sometimes it would strike in the dining hall, forcing her to leave her food untouched. No one else could hear it. No one else knew what was happening. Mira's grades began to fall. The teachers who had once been impressed by her dedication now looked at her with disappointment. She was not meeting her potential, they said. She was not living up to the promise she had shown. She wanted to scream at them. She wanted to tell them what Kethra was doing. But she stayed silent, because Mira understood something that most people did not. She was not just a student at this academy. She was a representative of her entire species. Everything she did, everything that happened to her, would reflect on humanity. If she complained about bullying, they would say humans were weak. If she accused a senator's daughter of harassment, they would say humans were liars. If she fought back, they would say humans were the violent animals everyone believed them to be. And if she gave them any excuse, Kethra's father could use his power to end humanity's provisional status. Earth would be cut off from the galaxy. All the doors that had just begun to open would slam shut forever. So Mira said nothing. She suffered in silence, and every day she broke a little more. Syl watched his friend disappear. The bright, determined girl he had met on the shuttle was gone. In her place was a shadow, thin and pale, with dark circles under her eyes and a constant tremor in her hands. "You have to tell someone," he begged her one evening. They were sitting in a quiet corner of the garden, hidden from view by glowing purple trees. "You cannot go on like this." "Tell them what?" Mira's voice was hollow. "That I am hearing sounds no one else can hear? They will think I am going crazy." "I believe you," Syl said. "You are my friend. Of course you believe me." Mira laughed, but there was no humor in it. "But no one else will. Kethra has made sure of that. She is always so careful. There is never any proof." "Then we find proof," Syl insisted. "There must be a way." Mira shook her head. "Even if we did, it would not matter. Her family is too powerful. They would destroy me, and then they would destroy any chance my species has of being accepted here." Syl was quiet for a long moment. "Is it worth it?" he asked finally. "Is humanity's future worth your destruction?" Mira did not answer, but in her heart she believed it was. Instructor Vornash noticed the change in the human girl. It was hard to miss. She had gone from one of the most promising students in his class to one of the worst. She could not focus. She could not answer questions. Sometimes she would sit completely still, her face twisted in pain, as if something was hurting her that no one else could see. He knew something was wrong. He had taught for 40 years. He had seen bullying before. He recognized the signs, but he chose to do nothing. The girl was human. The Voss family was powerful. Getting involved would mean taking sides, making enemies, risking his comfortable position. And for what? For a member of a primitive species that most of the galaxy thought should never have been admitted in the first place? No. The smart thing was to stay out of it. The girl would adapt or she would leave. Either way, it was not his responsibility. He turned away and focused on his lesson. In the back of the classroom, Kethra watched Mira with cold satisfaction. The human was breaking exactly as planned. A few more weeks, maybe less, and she would quit. She would run back to her primitive planet with her tail between her legs. And that would prove what Kethra had always known. Humans did not belong among the stars. They were not meant to be here. They were a mistake that needed to be corrected. She touched the device hidden under her collar and increased the frequency, just a little, just enough to make the pain worse. In her seat, Mira flinched. A small drop of blood appeared at the edge of her ear, so small that no one noticed. No one except Syl, who saw it and felt his heart break. That night he made a decision. If Mira would not ask for help, he would find another way. He began to investigate Kethra on his own, looking for any evidence he could find. He did not know that time was running out. He did not know that Kethra was growing impatient, tired of waiting for the human to break on her own. He did not know that in 3 days, Kethra would decide to end things once and for all. And Mira, lying awake in her room with blood on her pillow and pain screaming through her skull, did not know that she was about to discover something about herself. Something that Kethra had never bothered to study. Humans were weak in many ways, but there was one thing they could do that no other species in the galaxy could match. They could survive. The biodome was the largest structure in the Academy. It covered nearly a square kilometer, filled with plants and animals from dozens of different worlds. Students used it for survival training, learning to navigate alien environments and find food and shelter in unfamiliar terrain. It was also the one place in the Academy with no surveillance cameras. The ecosystems inside were too complex, too delicate. Electronic equipment disrupted the careful balance of life. Kethra had chosen it for exactly this reason. She followed Mira into the dome on a gray afternoon when most students were in class. The human girl was alone, walking slowly through the simulated forest, probably looking for a quiet place to rest. She walked like someone carrying a weight too heavy for her small body. Kethra clicked her mandibles in anticipation. Today she would finish this. Mira heard the footsteps behind her and knew immediately who it was. She did not turn around. She kept walking, her heart pounding, looking for a way out. But the trees had grown thick around her, and she had wandered far from the main path. "There is nowhere to run, little human," Kethra's voice echoed through the artificial forest. Mira finally stopped and turned to face her tormentor. The Vel'Korath stood 3 meters away, towering over her like a nightmare made real. "What do you want?" Mira asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I want you to leave," Kethra said simply. "I want you to go back to your dirty little planet and never return. I want your species to understand that they do not belong here. And if I refuse?" Kethra made a sound like grinding stones. It might have been a laugh. "Then I will make you." She reached under her collar and pulled out the sonic device. For the first time, Mira could see the thing that had been torturing her for weeks. It was so small, so simple, such a little thing to cause so much pain. "This has been set to low power," Kethra explained. "Enough to hurt you, enough to make you weak. But today, I think we will see what it can really do." She pressed a button on the device. The sound that hit Mira was like nothing she had ever experienced. It was not just pain. It was the end of everything. It was every nerve in her body screaming at once. It was her brain trying to tear itself apart inside her skull. She fell to her knees, then to her hands. Blood began to pour from her ears, bright red against the alien grass. Through the haze of agony, she heard Kethra's voice. "Go home, little ape. You do not belong among the stars." Something inside Mira broke, but it was not the thing Kethra expected to break. Deep in the human brain, there is a switch. It exists because humans evolved on a world that wanted to kill them. Predators, disease, starvation, war. For 200,000 years, humans survived not because they were the strongest or the fastest, but because they refused to die. The switch is called the survival response. When it activates, everything changes. Pain becomes information. Fear becomes fuel. The body releases chemicals that would kill most species, pushing muscles and nerves beyond their normal limits. Most humans never experience it. Modern life does not require it. But it is still there, waiting. Mira felt it activate. She stopped screaming. The pain was still there, but it was distant now, like a storm watched through a window. She could not hear anything anymore. The sound had destroyed something inside her ears, something that might never heal. But that did not matter now. Nothing mattered except the enemy in front of her. Mira rose to her feet. Kethra took a step back. This was wrong. The human should be broken, crying, begging for mercy, not standing, not staring at her with those flat, dark eyes that showed no fear at all. "What are you doing?" Kethra demanded. "Stay down." Mira did not respond. She could not hear the words. She simply walked forward, blood running down her neck, her body moving with a purpose that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than thought. Kethra swung at her with one armored limb. It was a blow that could crack stone. Mira ducked under it. She moved inside Kethra's reach, where the Vel'Korath's long limbs were a disadvantage. Her small hands found the joints in Kethra's armor, the soft places where the shell segments met, and she began to hurt the thing that had been hurting her. What happened next lasted 90 seconds. It was not elegant. It was not strategic. Mira had no training in combat. She did not know any fancy techniques. But humans did not need fancy techniques. They had something older, something that had let them bring down creatures 10 times their size when they had nothing but sharpened sticks. Persistence. Every time Kethra knocked her down, Mira got back up. Every time Kethra threw her away, Mira came back. The Vel'Korath was stronger. She was armored. She should have won easily. But she did not understand what she was fighting. She was fighting 200,000 years of survival. She was fighting every human who had ever faced something bigger and stronger and meaner, and refused to quit. When Instructor Vornash finally arrived, he found a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Kethra Voss lay on the ground unconscious. 3 of her limbs were bent at angles that made no biological sense. Her armored shell was cracked in several places, leaking fluid that might have been blood. Standing over her was Mira Chen. The human girl was covered in her own blood. She was shaking so badly she could barely stand. Her eyes were empty, her face blank, her body held upright by nothing but will. Vornash had responded to an emergency alert from Sil, who had been tracking his friend and had finally found a teacher willing to listen. He had expected to find the human injured, perhaps dying. He had not expected this. "What happened here?" he demanded. Mira turned to look at him. She could not hear his words, but she could read the shape of them on his lips. The survival response was fading now, and the pain was coming back, worse than ever. But she had enough strength left for one answer. "You are late." Then she collapsed. Sil caught her before she hit the ground. He held her small body in his arms, feeling how light she was, how fragile she seemed, and yet she had done this. He looked at Instructor Vornash, and for the first time in his life, he felt something close to hatred. "You knew," he said. "You saw what was happening to her. You did nothing." Vornash could not respond. He looked at the human girl, broken and bloody, and at the senator's daughter, defeated by something he had thought was beneath his notice. For the first time in 40 years, he felt ashamed. Medical teams arrived moments later. They took Mira and Kethra away on floating stretchers. Vornash stood alone in the biodome, surrounded by alien plants and the smell of blood. He had made a choice. He had decided that one student's suffering was not his problem. Now he understood the cost of that choice, and he would carry it with him forever. Mira woke up in a room made of white light. For a long moment, she did not know where she was or what had happened. Then the memories came flooding back, and she wished she could forget again. A face appeared above her. Sil. His mouth was moving, but she could not hear any words. Just silence. An endless, terrifying silence that she was beginning to understand might never end. She tried to speak. Her throat felt like sand. "I cannot hear you." Sil's face crumpled. He took her hand and squeezed it tight. Then he held up a small screen with words typed on it. "You are in the medical center. Your ears were badly damaged. The doctors are doing everything they can." Mira closed her eyes. She had known this was coming. She had felt something break inside her when Kethra used that device at full power. Some part of her had accepted the cost even before the fight began. She typed back on the screen he gave her. "What happened to Kethra?" Sil hesitated before responding. "She is alive. 3 broken limbs, cracked shell. She will recover in time." Good, Mira thought. She was not sure if she meant it was good that Kethra would recover or good that she had hurt her so badly. Maybe both. "What happens now?" This time Sil smiled. He typed for a long moment before showing her the screen. "Everything has changed. The Academy's biodome had no surveillance cameras, but it did have emergency systems, hidden sensors that monitored life signs and environmental conditions. These systems had recorded everything, not just the fight, everything. Every time Kethra had used the sonic device, every time Mira had collapsed in pain, every time Instructor Vornash had watched and done nothing. The emergency systems had been gathering data for weeks, building a record of systematic abuse that no one could deny. When Mira collapsed, these systems automatically flagged the incident as a medical emergency. The data was transferred to the Academy administration, and from there, somehow, it leaked to the galactic news networks. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched a small human girl being tortured by a senator's daughter. They watched her suffer in silence for weeks. They watched the instructor who saw everything and did nothing. And then they watched the fight. They watched Mira fall and rise again. They watched her face as she walked toward her tormentor with blood streaming down her neck and no fear in her eyes. They watched her refuse to stay down, refuse to give up, refuse to die. And for the first time, the galaxy saw humans differently. They were not just primitive newcomers from a backwater planet. They were not just clever animals who had stumbled into technology too powerful for them. They were something else, something the galaxy had never quite seen before. They were survivors. Senator Voss tried to control the damage. He called in favors. He made threats. He demanded that the footage be suppressed, that the human girl be blamed, that his daughter be portrayed as the victim. But it was too late. The story had spread too far, too fast. For every network he silenced, 10 more picked up the footage. For every voice he suppressed, 100 more spoke out. The Senate received more messages in 1 week than they normally received in a year. Most of them were about humanity. Most of them were positive. For the first time in 12 years, humans were not seen as a threat. They were seen as underdogs, fighters, creatures who would stand against impossible odds and never ever quit. The Velkorath Senate quietly distanced itself from the Voss family. Kethra was expelled from the academy. Her admission was erased from the records as if she had never existed. Senator Voss found himself increasingly isolated, his calls unanswered, his proposals ignored. Instructor Vornash was suspended pending a full investigation. He did not fight it. He did not make excuses. When they came to collect his credentials, he simply handed them over and walked away. He had made a choice. Now he was living with the consequences. On Earth, the reaction was complicated. Many humans were proud of Mira, calling her a hero, a symbol of human resilience. Others were worried, afraid that her violent response would reinforce the belief that humans were dangerous animals. But one thing was clear: humanity could no longer be ignored. The provisional species that everyone had dismissed was now at the center of galactic attention. Mira's mother appeared on news networks across the planet, speaking about her daughter with tears in her eyes. She did not go to that academy to fight, she said. She went to learn, to build bridges between our world and the others. They pushed her until she had no choice. And still she tried to protect us, even when they were destroying her. In the medical center, Mira received visitors from species she had never met. They came to bow to her, to thank her, to tell her that she had given them hope. She did not understand most of them. Her world was silent now, and she was still learning to read lips. But she understood enough. On the 5th day, the doctors gave her their report. The damage to her ears was permanent. The delicate structures that allowed her to hear had been completely destroyed. No surgery could repair them. No medicine could bring them back. But there was another option: cochlear implants, advanced technology that would let her hear again. Not perfectly, not the way she had before, but enough. Enough to speak, enough to learn, enough to live. Mira agreed to the surgery without hesitation. Sil stayed with her through the procedure and the recovery that followed. He held her hand when she was afraid. He made her laugh when she was sad. He reminded her again and again that she was not alone. "You saved more than yourself," he told her one day, typing the words on the screen so she could read them. "You saved your species. You changed how the galaxy sees humanity forever." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she typed her response. "I did not want to be a symbol. I just wanted to survive." "Sometimes those are the same thing," Sil replied. Outside the medical center, the galaxy continued to change. Proposals that had been blocked for years were suddenly moving forward. Humanity's provisional status was up for review, with a strong movement to grant them full membership. Other species were speaking out about their own experiences with the Velkorath, their own stories of bullying and abuse. Something had shifted, something fundamental, and it had all started with one small human girl who refused to stay down. In his empty quarters, Vornash watched the news feeds and felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had been a teacher for 40 years. He had believed he understood how the galaxy worked. He had been wrong. The human had shown him something he had forgotten. There were things more important than staying safe, more important than avoiding trouble, more important than protecting your position. Sometimes you had to stand up. Sometimes you had to fight. Sometimes you had to accept the cost. He had failed to do any of those things. And now a 17-year-old girl was paying for his cowardice. He did not know if he could ever make it right, but he knew he had to try. 3 months passed. Mira Chen walked through the corridors of the Galactic Unity Academy with careful steps. The cochlear implants were still new, and the sounds they gave her were strange. Voices sounded metallic. Music sounded flat. The world had a quality of unreality that she was still learning to accept. But she could hear. That was enough. Everything else had changed. The students who had once ignored her now stepped aside when she passed. They bowed their heads or made gestures of respect in their own cultural traditions. Some looked at her with admiration. Others looked at her with fear. She did not want either. "You are famous now," Sil told her as they walked together toward the main hall. "The most famous human in the galaxy, probably." "I did not ask to be famous." "No, But that is often how it works. Syl paused. How are you feeling? Really? Mira thought about the question. How was she feeling? She still had nightmares about the biodome. She still flinched at sudden sounds, even though the sounds she heard now were not quite real. She still sometimes reached up to touch her ears, expecting to find blood. I am surviving, she said. That is what humans do. They reached the main hall, where a large screen displayed the latest news from across the galaxy. Humanity's provisional status had been officially reviewed and upgraded. They were now considered a developing species, one step below full membership. It was the fastest advancement in Unity history. The screen also showed images of Senator Voss. His political career was in ruins. Other senators had abandoned him. His wealth was being investigated for corruption. His daughter Kethra had disappeared from public view entirely, sent to some private facility where she could recover from her injuries and her shame. Mira felt nothing when she looked at these images. No satisfaction, no triumph, just emptiness. You do not seem happy, Syl observed. Should I be? She almost killed me. She took my hearing, and now I am supposed to celebrate because she is being punished? Many people would celebrate. Then many people do not understand what it costs. Mira turned away from the screen. I did not want revenge. I wanted to be left alone. I wanted to study and learn and make my family proud. That is all I ever wanted. They walked in silence for a while. Then Syl spoke again. What do you want now? Mira considered the question. I want to finish my education. I want to go home eventually. I want to see my mother and my brother and eat food that does not taste like medicine. That sounds reasonable. And I want to make sure this never happens to anyone else. Mira stopped walking and turned to face her friend. There are other provisional species, other students who do not fit in, other Kethras waiting to hurt them. Someone needs to speak for them. Syl's eyes widened. You want to become an advocate? I do not know what I want to become, but I know I cannot just go back to being invisible, not after everything that happened. A voice interrupted them. Miss Chen? Mira turned. Instructor Vornash stood a few meters away. He looked older than she remembered. His scales had lost their shine, and his posture was bent in a way that suggested more than physical tiredness. He had been reinstated to his position 2 weeks ago. The investigation had found him guilty of negligence, but not malice. His punishment was a formal censure and mandatory training in student welfare. Many people thought he had gotten off too easily. Mira was not sure what she thought. Instructor, she said. Her voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Vornash approached slowly, as if he was afraid she might run or attack. I have been wanting to speak with you, to explain, to apologize. You have been avoiding me for 3 months. Yes, he did not deny it. I was ashamed. I still am. Mira said nothing. She simply waited, her dark eyes fixed on his face. I should have stopped it, Vornash said. The words came slowly, painfully. I saw what was happening. I saw you suffering, and I chose to do nothing because it was easier, because getting involved would have created problems for me. Yes, Mira agreed. You should have stopped it. I told myself it was not my business, that students needed to solve their own problems, that you would adapt or leave. He paused. I was a coward, and you paid the price for my cowardice. Mira studied him for a long moment. She could see the guilt eating at him. She could see that he meant every word he said. But she could also remember lying on the ground with blood pouring from her ears, wondering if anyone would come to help her. I accept your apology, she said finally, but I do not forgive you. Maybe someday. Not today. Vornash nodded. He seemed to have expected this answer. I understand. Do you? Mira stepped closer to him. Despite her small size, despite everything, he took a step back. You watched me suffer for weeks. You had the power to stop it at any time. One word from you, and Kethra would have had to find another target. But you decided I was not worth the trouble. Yes, I lost my hearing because of that decision. I will never hear music the way I used to. I will never hear my mother's voice the way I used to. I will never be the same person I was before I came to this place. Vornash lowered his head. I know. Good. Mira stepped back. Then you understand why forgiveness is not something I can give you easily. You will have to earn it, not with words, with actions. She turned and walked away. Syl followed her, leaving Vornash alone in the corridor. That was very mature, Syl said quietly. I do not feel mature. I feel tired. Mira sighed. But holding on to anger will not give me back what I lost. It will only make me bitter. And I have seen what bitterness does to people. What will you do now? They had reached the entrance to the garden where they had first talked about Kethra months ago. The purple trees still glowed. The alien flowers still bloomed. The academy continued on, unchanged by everything that had happened. But Mira had changed, and she would never go back to being the girl who had arrived here with stars in her eyes and hope in her heart. Now I go to class, she said. I study, I learn. I become the best student this academy has ever seen. And when I graduate, I use everything I have learned to make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. She looked up at the sky, where strange stars shone through the dome above them. Somewhere out there was Earth, her home, the place she had left to prove that humans belonged among the stars. We are going to be okay, she said softly. Humanity, we are going to make it. Not because we are the strongest or the smartest, but because we do not give up. We get knocked down and we get back up, again and again, until there is nothing left to knock us down. Syl smiled. That sounds very human. It is. Mira smiled back, and for the first time in months, it reached her eyes. It is the most human thing there is. In the Academy archives, a new entry was added to the xenobiology curriculum. It was flagged as required reading for all instructors and all students. The title was simple: Human Persistence and Pain Response Under Extreme Duress. It detailed the events in the biodome. It explained the biology behind human survival responses. It described what had happened to Mira Chen and what she had done in return. The final paragraph read, humans are often dismissed as primitive, fragile, and unsuited for galactic society. This case study demonstrates the danger of such assumptions. Human tolerance for pain and abuse should never be mistaken for weakness. When pushed beyond their limits, humans do not break. They transform. And what they become is something the galaxy should never underestimate. Below this paragraph, someone had added a handwritten note. The handwriting belonged to Instructor Vornash. Do not wait until the damage is done. Act before it is too late. It was the first step on a long road toward redemption. He did not know if he would ever reach the end, but he was finally walking it. And somewhere in the academy, Mira Chen sat in a classroom, taking notes, asking questions, refusing to be invisible. She was scarred but not broken, changed but not defeated. She was human, and that meant she would never stop fighting.